right, everybody, ready for a deep dive? Today, we're tackling a phrase that might sound a little, well, intense at first glance. Fear of the Lord.
Yeah, it's not exactly the lightest topic, is it? But that's often how it is with these ancient wisdom sayings, right? They have a way of sounding a little cryptic, maybe even a bit harsh, at least on the surface.
Definitely. And we're drawing on a podcast about Proverbs today, which you shared. And I have to say, I'm really intrigued to unpack this idea of fear of the Lord. Because, at first glance, it doesn't exactly scream wisdom or peace of mind, does it?
No, not really. No, you sort of expect something a bit more, well, inviting from a book that's all about wisdom, right?
Exactly. So let's jump right in, shall we? Proverbs 9.10 lays it out there pretty clearly. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. What are your initial thoughts on that? Because fear and wisdom don't exactly feel like they go hand in hand.
Right, and that's actually something the podcast addresses really well. They make the point that this kind of fear, it's not about being terrified of God, like he's some kind of, vengeful deity waiting to strike us down.
Okay, so we're not talking about walking on eggshells all the time.
Exactly. It's much more about cultivating this deep respect, even reverence for who God is, his holiness, his power, his absolute authority, recognizing those things and letting them sink in.
It's like you wouldn't just waltz into a meeting with, say, the president or a world leader you truly respected, would you? Your whole demeanor would change. You'd be aware of the weight of who they are. And this sounds like that's kind of what we're getting at here.
Absolutely. And that kind of awareness, it naturally shapes how you live your life, how you approach decisions, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And the podcasters made an interesting point about that. They said, this understanding of God's character, it has a direct impact on the way we live our lives.
It makes you think twice before making choices based solely on your limited understanding, right? Because suddenly you're aware of a much bigger picture.
Exactly. And this actually ties into something else they talked about, this idea of living differently, which I thought was so powerful. Because it's not just about, checking things off a to-do list of good actions. It's about the why behind everything we do shifting.
Right. It's not just about what you do. It's about why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Are you following rules simply out of fear of punishment? Or are you doing it because you understand the heart behind those rules?
It's like you could follow all the traffic laws perfectly. For the wrong reasons, you're just afraid of getting a ticket. But someone who truly grasps the reason behind those laws, they're following them to protect themselves and others. It comes from a completely different place.
It does. And that's what I found so fascinating about the podcast's take on this. They emphasize that this understanding of God's sovereignty, it's not just some nice optional extra in the whole wisdom equation. They're saying it's actually the very foundation.
Wow, that's pretty profound when you think about it. So to sum it up, fear of the Lord isn't about being scared. It's about approaching life with a deep respect for God and his wisdom and trying to align our lives with that, right?
Exactly. And, this is just scratching the surface of what Proverbs has to offer on this topic. But I think it raises some really interesting questions for us to think about, don't you think?
Definitely. What would happen if we truly allowed that awareness of God's wisdom and love to shape every choice we make, every interaction we have? What kind of impact could that have? Not just on our own lives, but on the world around us. I think that's something worth pondering.
Absolutely. It really makes you wonder what kind of world we could create if we all tried to live that way.
That's something to think about.